Hello everyone, welcome to my free weekly webinar. I'm so excited that you've come to join me. This is the third I've actually probably done many webinars. You can have a look back on my channel if you're interested to learn. Today is about homeschooling, how we got into it. We weren't always a homeschooling family. I wanted to chat a little bit about our community, how we've met like-minded people, and what it means to actually be a homeschooling parent, because it doesn't look the same for everyone. The amazing thing about homeschooling is it kind of came about for my husband and I by complete accident as a result of COVID. So I want to explain how that happened. But I want to just quickly give you a little bit of an overview into my weekly webinars. Every Thursday at 12 o'clock UK time, 4 o'clock Dubai time, I try and offer a bit of free information. Most of the very detailed information around what I talk about in my webinars is available through my podcast. I spent this morning doing 4 hours of recording on the testimonies of my testimony, at least, in my podcast, which will be episode 4 and 5 coming out this Friday and following. Very emotional for me and very powerful for me to put that down, and very nerve-wracking. So if you're interested to listen to that, please do go to the link in my bio and sign up to my podcast on Spotify or YouTube and have a watch of that this Friday when it comes out. But the thing to note is that ever since I was baptized, and I've given my testimony now, so I'm really looking forward to hearing what people think, because it is a story that demands a lot of open-mindedness, and I hope that you watch it that way. Is that I think that giving to those that are less fortunate than us is extremely important. So for those of you that don't know, all my webinars are free, but I also have a link in my bio where you can go and give a nominal donation of £10 or upwards to an orphanage in South Africa where they look after abandoned babies. And I think it's important. There's a Bible verse I've put in there as well about the power of giving to those less in need and how important it is, and how blessings do come back to you. God promises that in the Bible, and I think it's important that we all start to look outside of ourselves to see where we can help, and £10 can go a long way. So let's begin. Why do my children not go to school? It's a question I get asked all the time. When the kind of revelation hit me that homeschooling was the way to go for our children, I just thought that I would tell everyone my reasoning, and everyone I knew would also take their children out of school and start homeschooling, but it wasn't the case. My children have been out of school for 4 years now. And so we are kind of what I suppose you would call firmly steady and instilled into our homeschooling journey. What happened for us really was very different. I never had the inclination as a mother when my children were born to go down many routes in which I have gone down, and homeschooling was never one of them. We found it very important, like everyone else in our neighborhood in Fulham, in London, that our children's names were down at the best schools that we could possibly think that they would be suited to go to in the area. And they got in, and they were in those schools. My elder son was in there for a fairly short amount of time, my younger for even shorter. When COVID hit, we started to see how, a little bit under the cover of how children were being taught and how kind of really simple it was. In actual fact, the active learning that they were doing in a day was never more than 3 hours. And the rest of the time we kind of thought was really, really lovely, building of the character, building of the personality type stuff. But one thing I really did notice is the more I sat next to my son for all those months and over that time of lockdown, the more I listened to what I was hearing, and I thought, hold on a minute, like these little inferences and intonations and side conversations that happen within the facility of a child's classroom really do have ability to shape the child. Because after every day's learning, class would start at 8 and I'd see my son again at 3 or whatever the day was, 3:30 or something like that. And then sometimes he would go on to meet another teacher or another person to instruct him by the way of music or art or whatever else it might be. I was having to spend a good amount of time after each day correcting things that I'd heard. So-and-so said this, but it isn't always the case, And this would be anything from things that I truly believed to the value system for our family, to the way in which our children were being instructed to think or see the world. So these were big, big things. I'm not talking about little things here and there. Facts are a completely different ballgame. I mean, a fact is a fact is a fact. A child will pick up a fact if they're interested to learn. A child can learn a fact very easily by osmosis or through parrot fashion learning, as we know, and they can regurgitate it when it's needed. And once they've achieved that mark in that exam, it's highly unlikely they'll remember that fact again. Case in point, I learned to speak Zulu and Afrikaans for 18 years and can't hardly hold a conversation, which is a shame. Same goes for my husband, who learned French up to university level and cannot speak. So it really came upon me that the values being instilled in my child, I was a little bit like, what? There was nothing wrong with the school. I loved the ethos of the school. I loved everything that everyone stood for, but it was the micro opinions of each little person that I'd handed my child to over the day that suddenly kind of really stuck with me. That was a very much a side thought. And what really came to light for us with our first son, who struggled with reading, spelling, sounding out, was that before he was even 6 years old, he had a number of labels. Now, this really was difficult for my husband and I to understand. He had not even been so much as in school for, a minute, a year, 18 months or something like that. And we were being called in and told this, that, and the next thing. The second year that he entered into school, I decided to make myself the class mom to get a closer idea of what was going on and why I was seeing such like drastic change in my child. His character was changing. He was extremely downtrodden. He kind of didn't really believe in himself. He didn't think that he was all that. And he had always been a very, very timid child, my firstborn son, no longer at all. But this system was feeding that timid energy and not mellowing it out. And my husband and I started to ask questions. We also started to try and push back, because when I became the class mother, I started to ask other moms, seriously, are you reading with your child for like 5 hours at night? Or are you doing your spelling an hour a day? Or I don't understand what's going on here, but we're just getting all this feedback and this is difficult and that's difficult and this struggles and that struggle, and some of the moms of the top performers were dynamic working moms. They were like, no, we don't do anything. We just, some children just grasp concepts at different times to others. And that got me really set on a point, which was Jack was doing absolutely nothing wrong. Most importantly, I was doing absolutely nothing wrong. And the guilt that my husband and I had for pushing each other before work and in the evening. So have you helped Jack with the spelling? Have you? When he needs to read, he needs to da. When in actual fact, I look back and remember that in South Africa at that age, at 5, 6, and 7, I was playing in the mud until November of me turning 7 when I started school. So that kind of got me onto this path of labeling and what happens to a child when very early on in life that they are labeled. The school, bless them, by no fault of their own, had a system of stars, moons, clouds, So Jack was always on the cloud because, I don't know, he was timid, he didn't raise his hand in class. And he was in a class, remember now, of 18 students, okay? So that is pure luxury when it comes to a schooling system. He should not be being left behind, he should not be feeling left out, and he should definitely be getting some version of individualized attention. But as the time went on, less so than me seeing different teachers' values coming through in him and me having to kind of coerce this child out of himself, maybe the most important thing ever was that he was so unhappy. And not an unhappy whereby he was morose and he came home from school and it was the worst day of his life. Nothing like that. He skipped out of school. He was a very meek but lovely child, very fair in everything that he would always share. But just I could see deep down inside of him, there was a sadness that I couldn't quite understand. I spoke about this in one of my other videos. I said to him, what is it that's worrying you? And he said, Mommy, please tell me, is this going to be my life? I don't like going into this classroom and I sit down and I just have to shut up and stare at this board all day long. Is this my life? And I thought, how do I tell this child, honestly? Because I'm a big one for truth. And sometimes to my detriment, sometimes children aren't ready to hear certain things, but I thought I can't lie to him because until you're 18, that's what you need to be doing. And that's when my husband and I started looking at alternative options. We put him through all those £700, £1,000 assessments that they make you do. Is he dyslexic? Is he this? Is he that? He came out with a label of mild dyslexia, which I thought was interesting at the time. And I thought, okay, maybe that's what's causing the problem. But then I realized that almost every second child has a mild version of something. When I became the class mom, I realized that there wasn't one of those 18 children that didn't have something. If they were extremely bright, they had ADHD. If they were prolific with their reading and writing, they had some form of behavioral issue. If their behavior was just case in line, as was Jack's, and they were perfect and moderate and temperate and all that, they couldn't learn and they were slow and there was something wrong with their ability to read or connect or blend. So every single mother was living with this version of shame. Now, I'm not saying it's like this in every single school by any stretch of the imagination. I went to school my whole entire life. My husband went to school. We both became a deputy head girl and head boy, and we both really excelled through our schooling years. So I'm not here to shame anyone that believes in the schooling system and thinks it's right for them. I'm just here to tell you that if you feel helpless and hopeless and confused and you don't feel like your child is getting what you feel they deserve for what you're paying within the realms of a schooling system, I'm here to tell you there's life outside of that system, and this is kind of how it works. I think, and I'm grateful to God for COVID, because at that time we were able to look at things a little bit more differently, and we knew that we were moving. So we knew we were leaving the area in which we were living, and we had very little time left there, and we had one term between that we needed to pay for between now and when we were going to move. And something just came upon me, whether it was like the voice of God or something, and just said, do things differently, don't be afraid. And I thought, okay, So I called up the teacher. I set up a meeting with my husband, myself, and the teacher. And I said, look, Jack's not happy. You don't seem to be filling me with confidence that he's learning in the way that you would like. We've got this one term left before he graduates to the next year and before we understand what his future looks like. I want you to let me know what you can do for my child in this time. And the first thing that came out of her mouth was, look, I don't know what you expect from me. I have a class of 18 children. If Jack doesn't want to put up his hand, participate and get involved, I can't coerce him. I don't have the time and I don't have the energy wasn't quite the word she used. And I said to her, okay, thank you for answering my question, because I knew full well that even if I spent an hour a day with my child, got some outside support, looked at a couple of resources, that I would be able to do better than what she had suggested she could do at the bare minimum if she tried, or at least what she definitely possibly couldn't do, that I could do better with my child and I could do better by my child over the period of one term. I also realized, having looked at that time at a number of people that are unschoolers or homeschoolers, and unschoolers are actually people that don't believe in any structure of learning at all. They let that child learn by osmosis. Some of the most gifted children at musical school, at drama school, at top universities are unschoolers, which means that the mother allows the child to come into their own, and when they get to a point where they find what they want to learn, they become prolific. They become so thirsty and hungry for that knowledge that they become very expert in the field they choose. I don't think I have the guts at the stage to do something like that, but we are at least homeschooling. And when I learned from other mothers who had taken their children out of a system, the interesting thing that came up every single time was, even if your child today, until next year this time, missed a year of school, it would touch not one side in their life. The number of clients I've worked with through the Kinetic Blueprint, the number of people I'd come to know that had an accident or had some kind of an injury, or bless her soul, a girl that I went to school with had suffered with anorexia. These people came out of school for a year, 2 years, and they came back in. And they were nonetheless off. So my thinking was, one term will mean absolutely nothing. And I really want you to take that along with you for your journey. If your child is struggling, being bullied, battled, not learning, and you're feeling uncomfortable, really, there's nothing better you can do for yourself than taking time and knowing that it's not going to have a massive impact on that child. So we took time out. We removed him that term, and we removed my younger son as well. And I started to look at how I wanted them to learn. The next question that came up from a lot of you was, how on earth do you do work and school, and how do you balance it? And that was our question. My husband's an entrepreneur, I'm an entrepreneur. And I knew that when I taught my children, it wasn't quite the same as when they were learning from someone else. So we joined a beautiful company in England that was like a collection of homeschooling families that all shared resources and shared tutors. And we had someone come along and assess the children, and she said she was very happy to teach the two boys together. And in the areas where Jack was struggling, she would make Thomas kind of do foundational work at that level, and the areas where Thomas was excelling, Jack could work. So they could work together, and they would help each other with their strengths and weaknesses, being 18 months apart. And she taught me so much. When I watched this woman, she came over. She used to be in our house for 2 hours a day max, which meant that if people say how much time, it's another question, do you spend each day on homeschooling? Really, a child needs to learn for 1 to 3 hours a day, and that's dependent on their age. Can I tell you now that when the children are much younger, below the age of 7, they should be playing, cooking, getting messed, getting dirty, learning how to understand each other, learning their own behavior traits, learning boundaries, learning connection, being with their families, and learning through osmosis. After age 7, Weston A. Price speaks really beautifully about the connection of the young child's teeth and their ability to learn. I thought it was absolute nonsense until this teacher told me and tried to label my child, and you got this woman on a mission trying to figure out why Jack was picking up concepts so much later than other children. And it came to pass that he was one of those children that's teeth never fell out the same time as other children. All the other children's teeth were empty, and they had then come up with, they were just excelling at school, and Jack's teeth fell out very, very late. But the minute that his adult teeth started to come through, his ability to digest concepts and concepts of learning, both in maths and in English, blending, sounding out, phonics, it just kind of clicked into place. I thought, wow, imagine we'd lived in South Africa at that time. I would have saved myself 5, 6, 7, here in Dubai they start school at 3, 5, 6, 7, all those years of pain when I could have just let my child develop and grow into the person that he was meant to be. But I'm so grateful that, a lot of us say that about our firstborn children. They are such leaders and teachers for us. And I really admire Jack for everything that he had gone through for all of that. People still ask me, like, is your son dyslexic? Jack struggles to blend, and he struggles with reversals, which I thought was like I'm like, how can he reverse a B and a D? How can he do this? Then you go and have other children, and you realize every child does these things. So we don't at all use any labels when it comes to our children. There's a beautiful friend of mine that I've met here through our church, and she just said to me, a label, it talks about it in the Bible, a label is a declaration, yes? I think even the word autism means alone, to be isolated, to be unlike anyone else. So, to call a child or a person a label each and every single day that gives them that kind of character trait and definition, biblically, it's like a declaration. You don't want to go around declaring, I'm alone, I'm isolated from everyone else, I'm not like anyone else. Maybe there's a positive thing you can bring out from there. But I really have come to see that there are such a myriad of names and such a large level of scale when it comes to the things that we're calling our children, that it is not worth calling them anything at all except by their own beautiful names, and figuring out that there are a million different ways for a child to learn and a child to grow. So that first step that was given to us as a gift through the strangeness of COVID, I'm forever grateful for, because my husband backed me. I don't know how or why, and my sister always says to me, wow, I don't know how your husband didn't put his foot down, because we all have this idea of sending our children to these beautiful schools, or the schools that we went to with the lands and the grounds and the swimming pool and all of that. But I think we came to realize that the development of an individual is so much more than that. We, at this time, had traveled a lot. We were taking really good use of being a homeschooling family. We went traveling outside of school terms. We did project-based learning extremely deeply. So if we knew we were going to go stay in Greece for a month, we learned about ancient Greece, etc., etc., etc. And we also let the children lead what they wanted to learn. It was a massive, massive part of my understanding, was if you send your child home every day with a book that they have to read, they don't want to read it. But if you get your child interested in ancient Greece, dinosaurs, stories of the Bible, how Moses and the Red Sea, and that child wants to know. My son comes down to me to ask me to read more of a certain Bible story to him in his breaks when he's working here at home on the days that he has a tutor. So that has been really, really interesting to note. When a child is interested and thirsty to learn, you do not have to force them. And that was the complete antithesis of what I had seen at school. So once we kind of had taken that leap, we had to figure out how we were going to build our homeschooling community. The first hurdle that we hit was after 6 to 9 months of working with a tutor, mommy being around the house, us doing fun things and going to our usual afternoon activities, that they did really miss friends. It's a big question that we get often asked. And that is where it came to pass that we started in London doing little kind of like mini groups. There was a girl in the neighborhood who would teach skateboarding, and we see if other children would come along. You meet people around and about, but at the time when I was living in Fulham, which was 2-3 years ago, there wasn't much going on. Oddly enough, a friend who's now a friend, they became the tenants of our house when we left Fulham, and she's now just recently told me that there is beautiful homeschooling facilities set up in Fulham that weren't there before. So please don't be afraid if you're thinking about homeschooling to dig and see if there are any groups around you. It is really empowering to have a group of people that you could talk to. And it's also really, really empowering to have other like-minded moms. And that was the next question I got. How did you meet like-minded moms? When we came to Dubai, we thought, look, we'll just get the boys learning the curriculum that they want to learn, and I'll find all the extramural activities they need to do, because there are so many. But it really did come down to where are our friends day today and how are we going to meet them? So I was just over the moon when I found, I think it was through Instagram, a community here that is 70 or 80 children strong, and each one of them are homeschooled. The first time we went to go meet the community, I said to my husband, take a deep breath. Everyone is going to be a hippie, and there's going to be, like roving caravans and stuff. And let's just see. I'm sure we'll meet some lovely people. We got there and we were just blown away by the community. We were all together this morning outside in the gardens of the school where the children go. They put on a big concert, a big talent kind of concert. And I just looked around and I thought, wow, these people all being pulled together by Layla and Jackie, who own the place. And that has been a gift to us. How did they start it? How did they begin it? I don't know. Just get a group of moms, find another mom, find someone that wants to kind of put together some kind of a center or enrichment or education, and just connect and join people towards you, and you'll be fascinated with the people that you meet. Everyone is like-minded. Everyone seems on our wavelength. We see people doing similar things that we've always wanted to do. The mothers are sounding boards for one another in terms of what the next step is for our children and our learning. And every single person that I meet that comes to Dubai, somehow I'm trying to encourage them to come and have a look. If most people have an inkling towards being unhappy about something at school, and that can be an opportunity for them to go and look. Others are already on the track, and others might be homeschooling but don't have a community. So having that community has been absolutely amazing. I'm not saying that community is available absolutely everywhere, but all communities are there if you know where to look and know how to look. And I would say you could just pray about it, ask to be shown where these people are and how they are and what they're doing. My children are thriving, and that's been probably the kind of conviction of my husband to stick with it, because we were in the beginning, it was like, okay, look, we'll do 1 year, then let's see, then they'll go back to school. We'll do 2 years, then let's see, then they'll go back to school. And we've just been so happy with the setup that we've kind of been able to to achieve. There's a lot more kind of bigger questions around the world, where the world is going and what children are being taught. So that inkling in me around values and things that children were learning has really kicked to a new high now when I see some things that they're teaching in school over in America, in South Africa, in London, and here in Dubai, less so, but I'm sure very much under the radar. So we have to remember that, you know, for from 8 to 3 or 8 to 4 every single day, you know, the amount of information and connection and knowledge you can impart from your life onto your child is quite a lot. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with school, but I'm saying if there's anything uncomfortable, doesn't mean you have to pull your child out of school and homeschool, but please don't just sit with it. You can try and fix it, try and move it, and there are a million ways to kind of get around it. The years for schooling for a child are extremely important, and we can lose our children through those years, especially as they get older and they rely more on friends and the like. It's important for us to find a way to keep that connection. And we found that homeschooling has helped us remain really closely connected to our children and really being able to instill what we wish to instill in them. You don't have to teach yourself. That's been a beautiful learning of mine. I teach a little bit. I do Bible study with the children an hour a day, and I teach them all the time. We teach cooking. I teach all the time, but for their core math and English curriculum, we have someone to come and support, an amazing young guy who actually was at a top school here in Dubai. And for a myriad of different reasons, you will hear a lot of interesting stories from tutors that have become tutors and have left high positions in schools for a myriad of different reasons. I think what was a very big, strong conviction for me was that a lot of teachers had moved out of schools because they were pregnant and they knew they'd had children and they didn't want children exposed to the things that they'd seen from the inside. Schools are businesses at the end of the day. I'm not saying all of them are bad. I went to a lovely school and I loved my time at school. I really, really did. So I'm not sitting here like shaming anyone or shaming anyone doing anything differently. But I am saying that the world is changing and the world is changing fast. And we need to be careful what our children are exposed to, and we need to understand that they are really understanding, and you are understanding the concepts and the value systems that they're being taught. I don't really want to get into all the topics here on Instagram about what and how and when and what we've heard from teachers and what can go on and so on and so on. But if you're uncomfortable, again, I'll just say it in any respect, then please do something about it. What kind of a curriculum? That people always say to me, so what do your children do? Do they actually learn? And I always laugh. I'm like, it's so funny. It's kind of like what I said on my podcast this morning. I said, and I really do urge people to have a listen to the episode with an open mind. But I said, if people could see in the spiritual, if people could see in the spirit realm, which is something that I have had since a child, and a lot of people have, so many people, you know, you'd be down on your hands and your knees praying morning, noon, and night. I can tell you that much. And I think it's kind of the same for homeschool. It's about having that ability to just, I don't know, like do something different and not feel afraid and not feel scared. So that was really it for us. We saw things that we probably didn't want to see or shouldn't have seen, or, you know, not many people will see as they move through school, and we just decided to make a change. The curriculum is exactly the same or completely different depending on how you would like it. So if you want your child to sit the normal British curriculum, the IB curriculum, the American curriculum, you can easily do that simply and easily yourself at home using a million different White Heart or I can't even think of all the programs. There's a dime a dozen of programs that will get your child through all of the curriculums, whether they need. But also, you need to understand what you want for the long-term future of your children. So what kind of resilience you want your children to learn? Is religious or Bible study a part of your learning? Do you want your child, sporting? Of what importance is that, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And people can build any curriculum that they like. There are also a lot of companies around that really actually were fascinating for me to learn about, whereby if your child spent a year where they were unwell or a year just recovering from trauma or bullying or whatever might have happened at school, and they never did one iota of work, there are a number of companies that will get your child up to speed to go back into the mainstream curriculum in something like 8 to 18 months, 6 months at the shortest, if the child is bright and clever, which every single child is. So the whole idea of being beholden to the system really does shift when you start to become a homeschooling mom. And it's fascinating to see how different moms do different things. You know, I thought it was the be all and end all each year that you knew the things that you knew. But if you think about the way the school system works, in actual fact, it encourages you to parrot fashion learn a whole bunch of facts which have no bearing on your life, the future of your life and the job you'll end up doing. And then to kind of parrot fashion regurgitate them onto a paper, get a mark, grade yourself forevermore and your worth onto that mark, forget the information, then move on to the next set of information. So when you're homeschooling, you can cherry pick. And homeschooling is very different from normal schooling in that the benchmarks are much more widened out. So if in a year between you being 7 to 8, 8 to 9, 9 to 10, you don't achieve the certain guidelines that schooling system believes you should be achieving within that year, well, then you're behind and there's something wrong with you. Homeschooling actually stretches that span of year out to 3, which gives you 3 good years in which you can develop certain skills and attributes. Now, you know when your child turns 1, 2, and 3 that everyone is looking at your baby and asking you, is it crawling, is it talking, is it walking, what's its first word? And for anyone like me who had children that walked very late, my children spoke well and never had a problem with that, but I know people that have struggled with delayed speech and development of speech. It's nigh on traumatizing to go around when everyone else's child is walking and everyone else's child is standing and everyone else's child is sleeping through the night, yet every child walks and talks. So the interesting thing is that it is a system that pushes us towards a pressure that is completely and utterly unnecessary. Some children, I thought my son was never going to be able to grasp handwriting. And I look at his writing today and a tear comes down my eye. Not because he's done anything miraculous, but because I was so pressurized in those early days. And I got into such a wedge about thinking that he was never going to be able to write well. I look at my own handwriting. I can't read a word that I've said. I used to get A's for everything. And I cannot read a word that I've written because I'm so over being conditioned to write in such a certain way. I just write how I want it to come out and how it feels. And it took me from 18 to 40 to decondition myself to do everything perfectly and know everything and so on and so on. So yes, modern homeschooling might encourage those children that struggle with writing to grasp their spelling, to grasp their narration, to grasp their grammar, to grasp their creativity through storytelling, etc., etc. But if they really struggle, to start to touch type and understand how to use a laptop and a computer. We need to realize that we want our children prepared for the work that they're going to do for the rest of their life. I came out of school at 18, head of everything, and 8, and how many ever, 8, I took on extra subjects, so 7 or 8 A's, and not a clue as to who I was in the world. So I've really seen that in my children, being close to them, being connected to them, and guiding the understanding of who they want to be and how they can get there quicker, faster, and more grounded and more holistically. You know, we do find that disconnect when we send our children away from 8 in the morning till 4 or 5 in the afternoon. And I know, and it is a luxury for both my husband and I to work from home and be entrepreneurs. And that was a life we created. It wasn't always like that. When my sons were first born, I was dropping them off at nursery at 7 in the morning. And I would beg my boss, please, I'll do all my work, please, please, please. And I would go and try and fetch them by 3 o'clock if I could. But I know most moms, based on their bosses and their work and the same work that I was doing, could only get there by 5, 6, 7 o'clock at night. That is half the time away from your child in those very, very formative years. And I didn't really feel that uncomfortable about it because I felt like it was the way of the world and it's what everyone did. But it was only when I got my child back that I realized, oh my goodness, one of the first things we realized as a family over COVID, when we started to properly homeschool and everyone else went back to school, was I didn't have to have my child deciding whether they should wear a mask or not. They didn't have to, they were at home. But we sat down as a family every single day and we had a hot lunch together that I'd cooked with love, a meal, or my husband had cooked because he loved to cook. And that was like, that took me back to traditional days where I thought, wow, this is this whole thing they talk about, this the nuclear family and how we can teach and learn and grow together. We shared a meal each and every single afternoon. That break in the middle of the day, how are you going, how are you feeling, what's come up for you, what have you learned? Because the fascinating thing for me was, even though my son was always very descriptive, fair, and very able to share everything, I could never really understand what had gone on in the days. And I did know that the days where his emotions had overwhelmed him and it had been too much for him, whether there'd been an argument with another child or a teacher had done something that wasn't quite right, whatever it might have been, they hold all of that inside. They have to put that emotional regulation on hold for the betterment of how they should be and behave at school. And then you would see it. You'd pick them up and they'd just be like a flailing wreck. And I remember thinking, wow, yeah, this is putting a lot of pressure on our children to conform to the system. And then they would like break down at the end of the day. Now, I'm not saying that that's all children. And I'm not saying that that's all schools. As I said again, and I'll say it a million times, I went to school and I absolutely loved it. But just in this modern world, we found that building our own way of educating our children has been a game changer for our family. Today is really just about me sharing to you that I wanted to talk about Toe by Toe, a resource by a South African woman that I love. Twinkle, a free resource online which offers a lot of support. Read Theory, an amazing online comprehension game. And then in Dubai, I have to take my hat off to Dubai. Everything here is for homeschoolers. So if there's surfing camp, there's homeschool surfing camp on a Thursday morning. If there's cooking classes at 5 or 4 in the afternoon after school, there's homeschool cooking classes. And I also take my hat off to the schools in Dubai, because my children are good swimmers and they got accepted into the academy or the squad swimming class of a school. And they don't go to that school, but they're very much accepted into that academy, and it's a part of their lives. So it is okay to do things differently. It takes a lot of bravery, and it takes someone that can really support you and see what you see and start to understand. But for me, that someone, if that someone doesn't exist and you're doing it on your own, or you kind of feel like you pulling teeth or whatever, like when you do something different and you get different results, or you see the results in your children, that will be a really strong show of the decision that you've made and of how right or how wrong it is. So I really am open to questions on homeschooling. Some would say that 4 years of homeschooling is a long time and I should know everything, but it's not. I've still got young boys. My sons haven't yet hit 13, 14, 15. And so we've got a lot to learn when it comes to homeschooling. But I do know that we are doing things differently. I know some people are interested to learn. Some people are not interested at all and think it's the craziest, silliest thing that you would ever do. So I'm not trying to convince anyone any other way. I'm just saying that if you are thinking of doing anything different, please reach out and ask me. I'm happy for my life and all my experiences, case in point, my testimony, my podcast, and everything that's been happening to me over the last short while, to be a case study for a lot of people. And if there's something that I've said that just like makes you think and you want to learn more and you potentially want to understand how you do it and how you live outside of system, then please do reach out. I hope I've answered everyone's question. The like-minded moms will come. And the funniest thing ever is that even through this channel, when I talk about homeschooling or I talk about certain things that we do that are a little bit different, the number of people that have reached out to me and said, I'm in Dubai, I've moved to Dubai, I'm here on holiday, I'm at this hotel, do you want to come have a cup of coffee? And I've done that and really made the most amazing friends. So sometimes if you're doing something differently, or if you're thinking differently and you are not doing the same thing everyone else is doing, and you think maybe the best thing to do is go and hide so that no one notices that your children don't go to school, or that you're having all these strange experiences that I talk about on my podcast, try and maybe find the strength and the courage to share, and you'll be very surprised how quickly you'll have a like-minded community of people that are just like you, trying to learn and trying to get better. So please take it as you will. Reach out to me if you need. And as I said, all my webinars are free, but if there's anything that's really touched you or helped you around homeschooling or schooling outside of system or supporting your children more holistically, even if it means that they go to a half day at nursery now and you pick them up and try and do something more interactive in the afternoons, whatever it might mean. I could touch on the spiritual side of things and what I've kind of noticed around children and God, but I touch on that a little bit in my podcast on Friday, and then the episode on the following Friday, and the impact you can have on parents as a spiritual cover and a spiritual protection, because I talk a little bit more in my podcast about that and the importance of that and how I've seen both sides of it, and really am convicted to share the power of being connected to your children, knowing what they're talking about, knowing what they're doing with their friends, understanding the agenda at play in the world, and whether or not your children are slowly but surely being indoctrinated or brainwashed and you don't even know it right before your very eyes. Is quite an extreme thing to say, but just keep vigilant and just keep connected and just love your children and just make sure you understand them and that you're close to them as you possibly can be. And we found homeschooling being the most amazing way to do that. You can't do everything yourself. Don't think that you can, I've got 3 businesses. I've got I love to cook. I love to be at home. I love to bake. I love to learn new things. I've got my plant garden right outside here. I can't do everything. So I've got this Elliot, as I said, amazing, helping us with our children. And then we've got this amazing community here in Cascade, which I absolutely love. All the other moms help me pick up the children. I help pick up their children. We do play dates. We do such fun things together. We go camping. We got surfing camp. We meet up. So yeah, it is a village, and it's creating your own little village, and it's been the best thing that we've ever done. So thank you, everyone. I will share this to my grid. Thank you for joining. Thank you for your time. And please share any questions my way. And remember that all the proceeds from my webinar go to Door of Hope. So if you feel called at all, I've put the Bible verse up there in the little link, that giving to the less fortunate is like giving to God himself, and you'll be richly blessed. And it's something I've seen more and more in my life as I just start giving to those in need. Imagine everyone just gave to someone who needed something. No one would need anything because we've all got more than enough to give. So if you feel called to donate £10 or anything around that number or up, you can look at the link in my bio. But otherwise, I will see you next week. I can't remember what I'm going to chat about next week, but if anyone has any suggestions, then please do let me know. I've got one on 5G, and I've got one on detox from vaccinations, I think was the one.